We're talking about Hanukkah today, and it starts this evening at sundown and goes for 8 days. So the menorah is not lit for two reasons. One is that Hanukkah doesn't start until sundown. The other is because the candles are a little wobbly. So don't trust it. So Hanukkah is a celebration of the rededication of the temple in Jerusalem in about 165 BCE. The Syrian Greeks overtook the temple and defiled it. And a renegade rebel tribe, the Maccabees, fought in the mountains and were quite rebellious. And finally, after 3 years, were able to recapture the temple. And it had been defiled because there had been swine that were slaughtered and also raised in the temple. And the Maccabees and the other Jews were horrified. It is the custom for a temple to always have some sort of light on, a candle of some sort. So in order to reclaim and purify the temple, they were going to light a candle, because that's the tradition for always a candle to be lit in the temple. And it signifies that God is always present and the light of God is always available. But there was only enough oil for 1 day. And it had to be pure oil, and they had to bring it in from outside, and it would take about 8 days to get the clean, pure oil into the temple to remain, for the light to remain lit, the candle to remain lit. And while we use candles now, it was an oil lamp that used pure olive oil to burn. But they only had enough oil to burn for 1 day. And so the miracle of Hanukkah is that although they only had oil enough for 1 day, the candle remained lit for 8 days until fresh oil could come. And so that was the miracle of the temple, and that was the miracle of Hanukkah. So traditionally, at this time, the menorah candle is lit 1 candle every day, cumulative, for 8 days. So if we were going to practice lighting the menorah, we would light 1 candle today, and then 2 candles tomorrow, and then 3 candles until all 8 candles were lit. There's a center candle that is used to light all of the candles along and along. So that's the celebration of Hanukkah, is the reclaiming of the purity of the temple. And we all can celebrate it because it's representative of so many things. And it's representative of the light that we all are, the temple that we all are. Each one of us is a temple, and each one of us has a light to shine. Each one of us is a representative of that essence of the divine that never can be extinguished. There was a story, and I don't know who told it, actually, of a young boy who came from Israel when he was 8 years old to New York, and he had never experienced New York. And he was dazzled by all of the lights. It was around Christmas time, and all of the elegant lights that he saw that were decorated for Christmas. And he was invited along with his parents to a family's home, and it was at Hanukkah time. And he was so enamored with all of the lights and the beauty and the elegance of the home that he was invited to. And then they lit the menorah. And he said that he was embarrassed because it was such a small little light among and amidst all of this beautiful Christmas bal de rah and decoration. And he was sort of humiliated by the modesty of it. And at that very moment then, the lights of the city went out. And there was just that one little light, this modest little light that was shining through the window. And he looked out up and down the streets, and that was all that could be seen. Up and down the street was one little light in most of the homes. And he got clear that no matter how showy things are, it's the modest and the lovely sweetness of it all. And we learn to trust that God is always present. And we learn that the regaining of the temple is the same for each one of us. Each of us is a temple of God. And we can rededicate ourselves to God with that understanding. And I think that at this time in our country, that it's really important to know that the menorah and Hanukkah itself represents the fact that our faith can override our fear. That always we can trust in the divine and allow ourselves to sit in the faith of it all rather than in the fear of it all. And I have another story I want to read to you, but I just want to mention that no matter what our belief systems are, what we were raised with, the whole idea and concept of light and the divine light that shines through all of us is the essence of who and what we are, the essence of our faith, the essence of the truth. So this is a story that was told by Arnold Greer, who was Judah's son. I'm just going to read this to you. Every year, Hanukkah arrives just when we seem to need it most. When the days are at their shortest and the nights have grown unbearably long, the menorah casts its glow upon a people hungry for light. In 1938, the entire journey of of the Greer family. That was in blue ink, and I don't have blue ink, so the Greer family was traveling into Holland because they had received a passport, and they were on a train from Kristallnacht, which was the night of broken glass in Germany, and they were fortunate enough to be able to travel into Holland with the intention of coming to America. So in 1938, their journey was filled with trepidation as the world found itself sinking into darkness until it had known in modern history of rationale seemed unavailable. If ever there was a need for light to guide our way, it was on this cold December evening in Germany, as the 8th and final day of Hanukkah was about to begin. The Greer family was sitting in their second-class compartment on a train headed for from Berlin to Holland, as they watched the winter sun slip beyond the horizon. It had been a long and terrifying trail that led from the night of broken glass to this moment. They could still hardly believe that they had managed to obtain an American visa and were now finally on what they prayed would be an uneventful journey to freedom. Judah and Reno Greer and their 2 children, Arnold and Ruth, spent the duration of the train ride staring out the window, nibbling on sandwiches, reading, dozing, and trying to behave as if the world was still a normal place. But unlike most of the other passengers, the Greer family remained acutely aware of the dangers that awaited them as this train approached the German-Dutch border. There, Nazi, German police, and officers of the Gestapo would all be present for a final check of passports and travel papers. For Judah Greer, however, there was an additional heaviness that weighed on his heart. As an Orthodox Jew and a cantor, his whole life had been devoted to following the ways of the Torah. Yet, here it was, almost nightfall, when the flames of the Hanukkah menorah should have been rising to spread their light, and he was forced to sit quietly in his seat with only the harsh glare of the naked bulb to illuminate the graying sky. Surrounded by strangers, he was afraid to strike a match or recite a blessing for fear of calling undue attention to himself and his family. Regina Greer, his wife, sensing her husband's inner struggle, tried to reassure him that God, who sees and knows all, would surely understand his situation and, no doubt, grant him many more Hanukkahs to celebrate properly. Judah nodded gratefully, but did not seem comforted. In a place and time of such spiritual darkness, the light of the menorah seemed more important than ever, especially on this 8th night of Hanukkah, which represents the culmination of the holiday. When all of the candles are lit simultaneously to proclaim the miracle of Jewish survival, under these dangerous circumstances, how could he possibly light the menorah? But then again, how could he possibly not? Judah turned the issue over and over again in his head as the train continued onward. Suddenly, the train screeched to a halt at the German-Dutch crossing, where it sat in the station for the longest 10 minutes of Judah's life, as the border police and the Gestapo prepared to check everyone's documents. He felt his wife's body go still next to his, and even his children sat frozen in fear. One wrong answer, one nervous twitch, would mean the difference between escape and imprisonment, between a new life and certain death. Then it happened. A Hanukkah miracle arrived at the German border just in the nick of time. With no warning, the entire station and every corner of the train was thrust into total darkness. All of the lights were extinguished at the very same instant, leaving the passengers and the approaching officers groping in the darkness. Without a second's hesitation, Judah seized the moment and reached from his overcoat on the luggage rack above. He put his hands into one of the pockets and pulled out a small package. Before anyone realized what had happened, he struck a match, lit a candle, and quickly warmed the bottom of the 8 other candles. He then planted them firmly in a neat row above the windowsill, and in a breathless whisper recited the Hanukkah blessings. As his family looked on in amazement, Judah carefully lit each candle and placed the ninth one, the Shalamish, off to the side. In the bright warmth of the menorah, his face radiated joy and peace for the first time in months. Seeing the unexpected light in the window, the Gestapo and border police came running. The sound of their boots striking the pavement with intensity echoed throughout the stillness. Nevertheless, Judah continued to focus his thoughts on the Hanukkah lights, while his heart pounded as loudly and rapidly as the quickening footsteps. When the officers burst through the door, Judah was braced for the worst, perhaps even the end. However, responding with rage at this pleasant display of Jewish rituals, the officers only noticed the opportunity that it provided. By the light of the flickering candles, they would now be able to see clearly enough to begin checking passports and papers. And so, with characteristic nasty efficiency, they set to work. And as soon as the process was completed and they were about to leave, the chief officer of the border police turned to Judah and thanked him personally for having had the foresight to carry travel candles on his trip. Meanwhile, the Greer family sat in stunned silence for close to half an hour, unable to take their eyes off the windowsill. Just as the candles were beginning to grow dim, every light in the station suddenly flashed back on. Judah, still in awe at what he had just witnessed, put his arm around his 12-year-old son. With tears in his eyes, he drew him close. "Remember this moment," he declared softly. "As in the days of the Maccabees, a great miracle has happened here." So we all are the great miracle of the light of the menorah, and the light of Hanukkah. And I have one quote that I'd like to share with you, and that is, "Faith makes all things possible. Hope negates despair. Love makes all things beautiful. May you have all three of these, faith, hope, and love, during the Festival of Lights." Let me read that one more time. Faith makes all things possible. Hope negates despair. Love makes all things beautiful. May you have all three of these, faith, hope, and love, during the Festivals of Lights. You all are the light of God. You all are the representation of the hope of Hanukkah, the beauty of Hanukkah, and the light of the menorah. I love you all. Namaste.
Namaste.
So I'd invite practitioners to stand and join with me. So I allow myself to turn within. To know that I'm united with all humankind. That I am the light, the love, the hope of the divine. And as that's true for me, I know it's true for each one of us. allow the clarity of the light to be ever bright and ever visible. In the darkest time, I have the faith of a Maccabees, knowing that nothing can defile the presence of the power of God. I allow my faith to override my fear. I allow my faith to know that everything is in divine right order. And no matter what the appearance, the purity and the power and the essence of spirit is always shining through. I allow myself to warm to the candle of the divine, to open to peace and perfection, and the deep-rooted truth of goodness that rests everywhere, that the light of God shines. Choosing faith over fear. Choosing faith over fear. Choosing light over darkness. Choosing hope over despair. I vow to keep my heart open. I vow to rest in peace. I vow to celebrate in joy. Knowing that God is always present, like the light in the temple is always present, like the light in my heart is always present. So in the season of light, this festival of light, I allow the sweet warmth of God's love to enfold me and to shine through me. Because I know it is all good and it is all perfect. And I invite you to know that with me on the deepest level by joining me as we say, and so it is.